Well, hey there. You've stumbled upon the intersection of internet quandaries and psychological insight. Welcome to Veritas Views on AITA, where the quirks of the internet meet the expertise of Veritas Psychology Partners.
TikTok or something where this guy says to his wife, "Hey, I just saw a woman in Home Depot looked exactly like you," and she says, "Oh, was she pretty?" And he went, because like the answer is always going to be wrong. Oh,
He
you're saying
cannot
it's a
win
pretty
that
woman?
answer.
You cannot. You
He
cannot.
cannot win.
And you could just see like that. It was hilarious. Obviously, it was an acted sketch.
Of course.
Absolutely hilarious to try to figure out like what would be the right answer to that question. Oh, the woman you were watching at Home Depot, was she pretty? Anyway.
All right. It reminds me of the joke our child told the other day. It was mildly amusing. And since the other Dr. MacBride tells jokes to end our meetings, I'm going to start one. I'm going to tell one to start it. He said, he came down to us and said, "Wow, life is full of lies. Like, Dr. Dre isn't really a doctor. Soldier Boy isn't really a soldier. And Adele isn't really even a computer."
It's time to move on.
I thought it was cute.
Yeah.
All right. Shall we?
Go ahead, Gail.
No, shall we, gentlemen? Shall we proceed?
Yeah. I was going to do the thanks for joining us. I'm your host, Michael MacBride. Apparently, we had a warm up back there. And today I'm joined by our dynamic duo of psychologists.
Hi, I'm Dr. Gayle MacBride, telling bad jokes because I do love a good bad dad joke. And I'm here with psychologist and dad, Dr. Daniel Kessler, my business partner, my friend, but apparently not my undying devoted audience who would laugh at anything that I put forward.
Yeah. No.
You're really going to tell me when I'm doing badly, aren't you? I can trust you.
Yeah. No. I think that's the cornerstone of a good friendship or a good relationship of any type, is the ability to say to someone, yeah, no. Yeah. It's one of those moments, if you remember, I haven't watched American Idol in, whatever, 15 years, 20 years. I don't know how long it's been on, but I remember watching it back in the day and thinking some of these folks didn't have really great friends. They had good friends who thought they were being good friends by telling them, "Hey, you should try out." But they didn't have really great friends who would say, it's wonderful. You really, like, your effort is terrific, but perhaps this isn't a good choice for you. And I think sometimes that's what a good friend does. A good friend can pull you aside and say, it's not a good idea. Not to be negative or disparaging, but to say, we love you, we care about you.
Mm-hmm.
This wouldn't be a good choice for you. And let's talk about other fun things or other things you could do. Try out for. And maybe I'm wrong. Tell me, like, let us know if you think I'm talking out my head here, as they say down south, and I'm totally wrong about this. But I just think a good friend will tell you when things aren't going well for you.
All right. Well, there you go. There's your first mailbag challenge of the
mailbag challenge.
We haven't even gotten into our ethical quandary or situation scenario. Michael,
you got something for us.
Actually here to discuss, because we're just shooting shit this morning.
Yeah, that's fine. I always like that. It's part of the fun. So I welcome both of you. For any of the newbies, if you don't know what this is, essentially what I've done is I've gone out and I found an inquiry on the internet where somebody has put forward a scenario and said, who's the asshole here? And that's hopefully what we'll determine. And if you're new, stick around through the credits. We always have a bonus conversation. Today, I have the question for them. But for now, neither Gayle nor Dan have seen this post before. I haven't shared it with them. They have no idea what I'm going to throw at them. So let's go. Today's post, the headline is, "Am I the asshole for not explicitly stating my punch is non-alcoholic?"
Go on.
Yeah, if the question was, am I an asshole for not explicitly stating my punch is alcoholic, I could see this, but okay.
That's what caught my eye, of course.
Yeah,
and made me want to read more. So I will read
going.
So the poster is late 20s female, and she says, I brought punch to my boss's house for a work potluck. I made a big batch of my go-to non-alcoholic punch, ginger ale, 7 Up, orange juice, frozen juice concentrate. I brought it because a few coworkers don't drink, and I thought it'd be a nice option for them.
Dan, are you thinking the same thing I am? That's the punch that I had in the 80s.
Yeah, it was. I'm like, wow. It's like
what goes around comes around, and what was cool was cool again.
That's their go-to, and I don't mean to sorry for casting aspersions on OP, but like really,
my mom made that punch in the 80s.
I know, like, okay, it's cute. You've got the frozen concentrate orange juice floating in the 7 Up, but like there's
back is a little ice cube.
You could do better, really.
Okay,
OP,
sorry, Michael.
You could do better.
That just really struck me as funny.
No, he could have done better. I
think it was she, but go on, Mike, please. But
okay,
anyway, so she gave us the recipe for her punch, which I
could.
We don't have proportions. I mean, it could go wildly wrong. You don't know. So
I mean, but where's an opportunity for some fresh? Never mind. Go ahead, please.
So she says, I didn't label it, but I also didn't even say or hint that it had alcohol. It was just punch. One of my coworkers started acting super drunk about halfway through the party. She got loud, started clinging to people, dramatically laughing and stumbling around. It was a lot. Then she literally fell off a chair, and after laughing it off, she looked over at me and said, God, what was in that punch? I told her it was non-alcoholic. She went quiet, disappeared to the bathroom, and left soon after. The next day, she sent me a long text saying I embarrassed her, that she had been drinking that punch all night thinking it was alcoholic, and that I should have told people it was just juice, that there was no alcohol. She's barely spoken to me since, and the vibe at work is tense. A few coworkers say she embarrassed herself and it's not my fault, but others think I should have just kept her believing it had alcohol and save her from the fallout. I didn't mean to trick anyone. I just made punch. Am I the asshole here?
Wow. Okay.
I
Is this a case of placebo having an effect?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm laughing a little bit because it seems so absurd. And you and I are both, operating on this premise that, to sort of lose your inhibition, you need the alcohol. But this woman believed, for whatever reason, that this punch had alcohol, and then sounds like she behaved as if she had consumed quite a bit of alcohol.
Yeah.
Placebo can have an incredible effect. Could that have been what's going on here?
If we're going to assume positive intent and assume that she wasn't just like wanting to show off for people and looking for an excuse to be drunk, that's quite possible. The placebo effect is powerful enough to create this sense of freeness that would allow her to disinhibit those frontal lobes. Alcohol impacts by reducing frontal lobe functioning initially and reducing executive control and decreasing anxiety and allowing us to be to say and do things that perhaps otherwise we'd feel uncomfortable doing. And if she believed she had that, I suppose, sure. The sort of falling off the chair thing is a little unusual. I mean, that's more like deep brain cerebellar stuff.
Well, I mean, depending on how drunk you are, I suppose.
Yeah, you have to be
That's why I'm wondering, did she have enough belief in this that then her body reacted as if she had had quite a bit to drink?
I think that's the kindest interpretation and probably not a terrible one. I would go with that interpretation. I think it's a reasonable interpretation.
Because it's so odd. It's so extreme that, I mean, I suppose you could act your way through it, but why would you? I'm having a hard time seeing a scenario where when you didn't feel intoxicated, that would be the outcome of an otherwise healthy individual, right? Like, as you said, falling off a chair could mean something else quite concerning. But in this case, she doesn't do it until she consumes this punch and then, behaves this way for a limited amount of time. And I'm always struck by the story that I heard. And Michael, help me dig this up because this is really an interesting story. So link in the show notes.
Michael will take that up.
He'll be like on it in 10 minutes here when I tell the story. There was a story of a woman, and now I can't tell you what podcast, NPR related, maybe one of those, hidden brain type, podcasts. But this woman who had IBS, really chronic, debilitating IBS, tried all of the treatments. Nothing made her better. Really made her world very, very small because of this irritable bowel syndrome and the symptoms that it brings. And finally, she ends up in a study for a new medication, and she is ecstatic and thrilled. But of course,
I see where this is going.
wait, you don't. There's a twist.
Oh, I don't.
Hang with me. Hang with me.
All
So
right.
she's in the study, and she, studies are often done with the medicine and a blind placebo. And as you are correctly surmising, Dan, she gets the placebo, and her symptoms improved.
Mhm.
At the end of the study, being an ethical researcher that they are, they say to her, ma'am, we're thrilled that your symptoms improved. However, you were in the placebo group. You did not receive any medicine. Now, I can imagine how she felt about that. And she said to them, but I got better. Give that to me. And they said, well, we can't do that. That would be unethical. The study is over. I'm sorry, you know, and sent her on her way. And she continued to suffer from symptoms. And then I guess at some point, and this is where maybe my details are a little bit fuzzy, so I could be a little bit wrong, but I think I'm right at the 10,000 foot level. She comes back to the research team and says, literally, this is the only thing that's ever made me better. Please, can I have it? I understand that it's a placebo, and yet it's the only thing that made me better. And somehow she manages to get back on it, and her symptoms remit.
Yeah.
Placebo is
Doesn't
very powerful, and we are doing a lot of recent research about this.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's
It
possible.
really is fascinating, the power of placebo, that doesn't surprise me at all. And when we look at sleep medications, for example, and Gail and I, both you and I do a lot of work with sleep. A substantial portion of the impact of sleep medications is placebo. And my understanding, and I'm going to maybe tick off a lot of people in our audience, is that melatonin is no better than placebo. But many people
As a
swear by
sleeping
it,
aid.
and yes, as a sleeping aid, and we've talked about there is some impact on circadian rhythms. Too much detail to go into right now, but I will say that like there are people who swear by it and for whom it really works. But when it works as a sleeping pill, it is placebo
Yep.
because the research shows it to be no better than placebo in the treatment of sleep. And there's lots of things like that. So whether or not they're an asshole, I have the "Am I the Asshole" story. I have the same one. I was a young psychologist talking to a friend. I was a research lab. I wasn't a psychologist yet. I was a research lab, and this researcher, she came to me and we were talking, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, I have this really bad sinus headache." Holds up the medication she's taking. She says, "I take this. I usually take Sudafed." She goes, "Oh no, I can't take Sudafed. Sudafed makes me like I have this horrible reaction to Sudafed. I cannot take Sudafed, but this works perfectly for me." And I flipped over the box and I said, "This is Sudafed. Sudafedrin hydrochloride." I'm probably pronouncing it incorrectly. 30 milligrams. Like, this is exactly the same product.
It's the generic version.
It was a different. It was under a different brand name.
Okay.
Yeah, it was generic. And she got angry with me and said, "Great, now I've got nothing to treat my headaches anymore because this worked and Sudafed make me sick." And she was really angry. And I thought, and I remember that since then, like, I didn't think I hadn't heard of "Am I the Asshole" yet. This was 35 years ago. But I remember it really well because I remember she was legit angry with me. And I was like, but, and I guess the question here, like, am I the asshole for telling her she was taking Sudafed? I mean, I can be a bit pedantic sometimes, but like, should I have just kept my mouth shut and not told her?
Friends will tell you when you did something wrong. Dan, you probably should have kept your mouth shut. It's
Should
one
have.
of those times I've been in that situation. You're like,
Yeah. Yeah. I think 60-year-old me would keep my mouth shut. I was actually, as I think about it, I know where the job was. I was 22 years old. And 22-year-old me probably wanted to show how smart he was to this PhD researcher.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I should have kept my mouth shut.
Maybe. maybe.
Thank you for clarifying that 38 years later that I was the asshole.
You're welcome. And you didn't
Yeah.
even have to write into the show.
But was OP the asshole here? Getting back to this question
I
here.
don't think so. I am really struggling to see that she sucks.
Yeah.
I don't know that it requires. Now, if she had been asked and answered untruthfully, that would have made her the asshole.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why at a work function, depending on the tone of the work function, we assume that the punch has alcohol in it. That seems a bit risky and not always appropriate for work situations. So I think OP made the right decision to default to a non-alcoholic punch. And then, if for some reason wanted the alcohol, could have brought the and spiked your own punch. But like that would have felt very transparent as opposed to bringing a punch and then labeling it alcohol. I don't see any gray here. I don't see that intention to deceive. And I think she fell on the right side of the decision for work function.
I've been to an official Veritas Psychology Partners work function where the chief executive officer of the company did provide a punch and it had alcohol in it.
And provided a non-alcoholic punch and labeled them clearly because there was a choice. And
it's true.
It was networking and socializing. It wasn't, we
don't think
wait for alcohol after the business, Dan.
That is accurate. That is also accurate. So, but backing up here to the question, I actually don't think anyone's an asshole here because I don't think the quote unquote drunk woman was putting on airs or faking it. I think you're right, Gayle. I think she was in that kind of placebo place and enjoying herself and losing herself as we can at a party even without alcohol or without any kind of. I think where and I get that she's embarrassed. I mean, it's embarrassing to act drunk and to find out that have everyone find out that no, you weren't drunk at all. So that being really angry, like here's an opportunity to laugh this off and say, "Wow, isn't this fascinating how this happened?" Being where she gets angry and creates tension in the workplace, I have a little issue with that. Maybe not asshole level, but she has some stuff there.
Yeah, I agree. Where she becomes an asshole is to rage out at this coworker and become blamey, as opposed to going, "Wow, I really don't understand what happened here." And while I'm glad I wasn't drunk, I'm not sure what happened.
Yes, exactly. That's the place to do that because being an asshole we've talked about this before, requires some intent. And even if she should have told, it's still like there's no intent here to get someone fake drunk. Like
But
I'm fine with that.
The coworker who was drunk becomes an asshole because she did intend to take her other coworker down the OP to the knees.
Yeah, that's problematic.
That behavior is.
Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, I'm good. I said what I was going to say.
No, I agree. I don't think she was being an asshole at all until she crossed that line by getting angry. There's so many opportunities we have to just laugh at ourselves or laugh at situations or just kind of go, yeah, and she just missed.
Yeah, and you guys, well, there are several in the comments. There are several side comments. I mean, usually, I guess you guys render a firm verdict, but I think I see where you're going, right? I mean, you've essentially.
Oh, do you want us to be more clear?
No, that's fine.
Not the asshole. The coworker becomes the asshole when she rips her coworker a new one.
What Gayle said.
Yeah,
exactly, for sure. And for the most part, the internet agrees with you. They, the vast majority is you're not the asshole for doing this. The interesting one is the everybody sucks here, and the everyone sucks here comes in with a group of people who says you don't bring something to a potluck and not label it. With food allergies and whatever, like you should make it clear what there is, like at the VPP meeting, non-alcoholic, alcoholic, so that you knew exactly what you're getting into, right?
So what you're saying here is that OP should have made a little card that said shitty 80s era punch and put it there. And then everyone would have known, or non-alcoholic shitty 80s era punch.
No, but like they they went into several people who have fruit allergies, and my mom is actually one who's like allergic to kiwi, which is an unexpected allergy.
That is unexpected. I would not think
So,
that you
you
can
know,
label
if
that.
you're allergic to citrus for some reason, you'd want to know what's in there. Now, you'd probably assume by looking at it, there's probably going to be some kind of citrus in there.
The floating log of orange juice.
Right.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, they said like the punch should have been labeled. Um, and the other thing where they thought everybody sucks there, including the other coworkers, who really don't get a mention in the story very much, is somebody should have intervened and talked to this person, because even if she was really getting
That's interesting.
intoxicated at a work event, they should pull her aside and intervened in some way instead of letting her spiral to the part that she's literally falling out of chairs and whatever.
I'm uncomfortable with that we missed that.
That is, yeah.
We
That
should
was
have.
kind of a miss on
Yeah,
our
we
part.
should have caught that. We should have
Yeah.
caught that. So we are also imperfect. But yeah, we missed that one. I think it's spot on.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. The other thing I enjoyed was they did talk a lot about the placebo effects. There were lots of stories about people acting drunk when they weren't, or acting high when they weren't high, and like all kinds of stories about that. And lots of tangents about labeling things at the potluck. And several people were like, you know, you could make it kind of fun and you could give it a funny name, but like, anyway, so. Wow.
Was all of the food at the potluck labeled and only the punched out? Like
That was actually one of the questions several people
Yeah.
asked, and we never got a response to.
That's a fair question. No, I had the question I had once for the first 5 years I worked at this hospital. In the physician lounge, there was a pot of caffeinated coffee and a pot of decaffeinated coffee right next to each other, and always in the exact same position. And then one day they came in and did some nothing, and they just flipped the two pots. And the question I had was, if you're like, which would be worse, if the surgeon who's about to operate on you was expecting caffeine and had decaf, or if the surgeon who was operating you was going for decaf and got caffeine? Like, which would be worse for your surgery? It didn't get recorded as a medical incident at all, as far as I know, but I've had that question ever since, because both would be bad.
Both would be bad. I think an overcaffeinated surgeon. Bad.
Oh yeah, the jittery hand. Yeah,
the jitters. You don't want your surgeon to have the jitters.
But you don't want the guy or gal falling asleep in you either.
Unlikely to fall asleep. Probably more of a raging headache.
Okay, all right, so fair. Which is not great, but the jittery hands with surgery.
Raging headache is easier to take care of.
I'll work with you.
I'll allow it. Okay.
I'll allow it. Okay, Michael, you have something else for us, but another tangent on my part.
Well, and I was just going to say they did both. The podcast you mentioned about the placebo effect definitely came up. There were several studies cited. So it was interesting, like the people who posted and was like, here's a study from 2001. Here's one about, 2007. Here's one from 2022. Here's one from 2024.
It is a growing current field of research, because we do know placebo has an effect. And frankly, the side effect of placebo, it is great. Right? I mean, we're not introducing new chemicals. This is
right,
or anything that's particularly active. So this could be really, really wonderful for those who are prone to really feeling that reaction to just the idea of the introduction of the thing. I have a couple of clients who joke about, just all I need to do is lick the pill. It's fine. Like, they know that they're not getting any psychoactive ingredients, but the reassurance of having that is often, just what they need. Or, the 3 or 5 Xanax your prescriber gives you a year that you keep in your purse or your drawer or your work bag or whatever, just because you have them. Like, is that placebo enough to know I have this? That reassurance has an effect.
I have had a number of clients for whom that has been a very effective tool.
Same.
Not even, yeah, and I don't even know if it's a placebo effect or not, but just the simple reality of, if I have a panic attack, I can take this. And I've had people have like 3 in their car, 3 in their desk at work, 3 in their nightstand, and never touch them. And then like years later, they're like, I don't even know it's good anymore, but it's there, and I know it's there. And if I start getting a little anxious, I remind myself that if I have a panic attack, I'll make it go away. And I never take it. And it's a fascinating, just like how much our brains can impact behind the scenes without us realizing is just.
Yes, no, I totally agree. And I think you're right, Dan. I think that's not exactly placebo, but
But it is, but it kind of is it. It kind of
it's
isn't. I don't know. I don't know what you call that effect. Like I didn't take it, but I have it just in case of. I don't know.
yeah.
We'll call it
Yeah.
placebo because it sounds better than that whole long string of words.
I'll be sure to link those studies and the podcast. There was one, Hidden Brain, more recently. There was an older Radio Lab one. Both were very interesting. So, but thank you both for another riveting debate and a glimpse into the collective conscience of the internet forums. Remember, morality is often shades of gray and not magic feather or not magic feather.
Back to the 80s punch, my mom would put sherbet in that bad boy. There would have been a floating balls of sherbet.
Sure, that would be.
And that was delicious. Get one of those balls of sherbet, slurp it, little like, oh.
Yeah.
Back in the 80s, Dan.
Yeah. That was an era.
That was the time.
That was a time.
Please follow and share Veritas views on any of the podcast platforms with your neighbors and friends. And as always, stick around through the credits for the bonus question or bonus conversation about the question I have for them today.
You can follow Dr. Dan Kessler at Dr. Dan Kessler and Dr. Gayle MacBride at Dr. G. MacBride. Oh, and you can find them both at veritaspp.com. Credits. Tickling the Ivories, Matthew Reddington. Art, production, and design, bringing this show together with flair and finesse, Michelle Love. Recording and editing, turning chaos into something worth sharing, Michael MacBride. Intro, outro, I'm Kelly Buttrick, a VO talent who just happens to be Dr. MacBride's cousin. Cats, CJ, Linus, Sadie, and Griffin. Hosting by whomever lost the coin flip. Interruptions by all their children. The content of this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional mental health advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Listening to this podcast does not constitute a therapist-client relationship. If you believe you may be experiencing a mental health issue, please seek the assistance of a qualified mental health professional. If you are experiencing a mental health crisis, you can call or text 988 from anywhere in the U.S. to be connected to Crisis Mental Health Services.
Thanks for listening. As promised, here's that bonus conversation. So, Dan, Gayle knows this, obviously, since she was here when this happened, but my parents are kind of cleaning out stuff from their house, and they present things to me like, would you like these? And so they had a stack of vinyl, which I was like, yes, I would like this. And there were some that I was like, no, not that. Yes, this I've never heard of before. And so I've been going through this process of listening to records that either, are like nostalgic or I've never heard of before. And so this was one that I'd never heard of. If you can see it.
Ian Hunter?
Ian Hunter. And can you read the title?
I cannot. You're tiny on my screen.
Yeah, sorry. You're Never Alone with a Schizophrenic. And so it was just kind of a funny, and I had no idea who this was, but once I looked him up, I realized he was the lead singer for Mott the Hoople, which is famous for the song All the Young Dudes, which is a song but you probably associate with David Bowie because he wrote it for them and sings backing vocals. And in fact, David Bowie liked Ian Hunter's band so much, he tried to give them Suffragette City and go like, hey, this is a song I wrote for you. And they're like, yeah, that's not a great song, which I would disagree. But anyway, the question.
I was saying, where's this going, Michael?
Hey, have a point, MacBride.
I promise.
There's a question buried in here somewhere. I can't find it. I can't.
So the question
there's a question.
There is.
Okay.
Over there. The question is, what is your favorite record? If you had to pick a record that you like to spin virtually or, on your iPod or iPhone or record. Wow. I know. Sorry, I'm old. Wow. What would you pick? What's your go-to record and kind of what's the memory associated with it?
Honestly, all of my music listening tends to be mood related. So it really depends on where I am. And I don't have anything that I'm sorry, I'm going to disappoint you here, but I don't have a favorite record. You
treat records and music like you do food.
Yeah, I just
the
whatever
season and the weather and
it is like if I'm out driving and the weather is nice and the windows are rolled down,
mm,
it's a totally different vibe than if it's a rainy Sunday morning or I'm heading into work or you know I do know that if I ever have the urge to listen to Blue October, I need to worry about my like I'm getting depressed or sad. That's another
mm,
like Blue October. If it like I go, oh, I should listen to that Blue October song. Like, oh, I better check on my own mental health. I don't know if there are other people have that same experience of their songs they gravitate towards if they're having struggles or whatever.
mm.
But no, I'm sorry, I got no favorite, Michael. I can't.
Hey, that's fine. Yeah, I would be really hard pressed to pick a favorite as well. And weirdly, going through some of these that I've heard all the radio hits from, but never heard the album, I'm like, oh, I see why some of those songs were not released. But Gail, I'm curious what yours is. Do you have one, or are you like Dan?
Well, I mean, I do like a variety of music, but if you were to pin me down and we were talking about albums, we were talking about vinyl, what came to mind was Madonna's Like a Virgin, speaking of being locked in the 80s. My dad had that record, and for whatever reason, it was the thing that I would most often put on in the living room next to the record player, and that was where I spent time. If I was playing indoors, when I was playing indoors as a kid, I often played in this sort of separate living room. It was a quiet space, and we had a family room that we often gathered in, and that was a little more informal. But there were often, well, I shouldn't say often, but of the people in my house, if you were going to be, in relaxation time, you'd be in the family room. So I could find some quiet time and be by myself in the living room, and I could turn on the record player and I could listen to, any of the, I don't even know, 35 albums that my dad had. He didn't have an extensive collection, so maybe that's why I gravitated toward that one. But I don't know, my era and all of that sort of pushes me toward Madonna and that like a virgin. Is that the record name or is it like a prayer? No, I don't
Like
know.
a
Like
Virgin
a
is
virgin.
the
I think it's like
album,
a
yeah.
virgin. Yeah, I see the sepia toned album cover in my brain even today. So if I picked one, it would be that one.
There you go.
Cool. Thanks. Well, everyone else, thanks for tuning in. Speaking of records, tune in next week for a whole other Am I the Asshole debate.
We love hearing from you, so please review us on Apple, Spotify, or, well, wherever you're listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, please review, like, and follow. Also, give it a share. This helps us reach more listeners.